Good morning, members, and welcome to the Audit and Risk Management Committee meeting being held today on Monday, the 17th of November 2025. I can confirm that we are quorate. As you are aware, the public element of today's meeting is being live streamed, and those participating in the meeting have given their consent to their inclusion. The recording will be available on the City Corporation's YouTube channel following the meeting, and it shall be retained for up to 1 civic year. Chairman.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Before we begin today's agenda, I'd like to take a moment to remind members of the importance of attendance at this grant committee. As you know, this committee plays a vital role in providing scrutiny on behalf of the Court of Common Council and also discharges statutory responsibilities. In-person attendance is essential to ensure members can fully participate in decision-making and other aspects of the committee's work. While I appreciate that some members do join online, it's important to note that remote participation does not enable engagement in all areas of business. Meeting dates are published well in advance to support diary planning. So if any clashes arise, I'd encourage members to contact our clerk, Molly, at the earliest opportunity to explore whether an alternative date can be arranged. Thank you. Over to you, Molly.
Thank you, Chairman. So moving to the agenda, at item 1, we have apologies. I have not received any apologies or been notified in advance of the meeting. Do any members know of any other apologies? Seeing none. We therefore move on to item 2, members' declarations under the Code of Conduct in respect to items on the agenda. I have not received any in advance of the meeting. Do members have any declarations to declare? Seeing none. Item 3, we have the minutes. This is for members to agree the public minutes and non-public summary of the previous meeting held on the 15th of September 2025.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Before I continue, I would like to welcome our real Town Clerk, Ian Thomas, and would like him to encourage him to take the seat which his team members have kindly reserved for him. Thank you, Ian. Do members have any matters of accuracy or any matters arising from the minutes? If not, can I take them as approved? Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chairman. So moving to item 4, members are asked to note the committee's outstanding actions. This item is for information.
Thank you, Molly. Members, we have one outstanding item, which is the external recruitment update. Would I ask you to hold any questions until the non-public session, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. At item 5, we have the committee's work programme, and this is for members to note.
Thank you. Do members have any questions or comment on the work programme? Seeing none, back to you, Molly. Oh, dear, gone.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. So at call over, we flagged that there were 3 items missing from your forward look. These are some of the regular risk updates. So just for purposes of the committee and just for accuracy, there will be 3 additional items being put onto the forward programme. These are going to be in May. So this is the annual report that you receive on risk management, and that's for information. In July, the risk appetite update, and that it's quite a key update. It's in relation to the work that we're doing on risk appetite and any revisions that we need to do in light of them having gone to all of the different service committees and boards. And then again in November, a risk appetite update. Again, apologies that these were missed. The 2 risk appetite updates are some of the new bits of work that we've been doing. So that's why it wasn't on your work programme previously, but we'll make sure that that record is updated in time for your next committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Diane. Yes, please. Simon.
Chair, so just one query, the terminology work programme to me implies it would include the underlying audits and reviews being carried out, which I don't believe to be the case. I believe this is very much the kind of committee programme. I just wonder whether the terminology could be clarified or should be clarified to indicate that the actual underlying work, project reviews and so on are scheduled and organised separately. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, please.
Thanks. So I mean, it's just titled the work programme for the committee. So it is the committee's work programme. So it's the cycle of business for the committee, something like that, perhaps. Because there are items that come up, it's all planned and it follows the same pattern each year. So if it's helpful to relabel it the committee cycle of business, we can do that. Would that be okay, Simon?
Fair enough. It's just when I saw work programme, I thought, oh, that's going to include the underlying audits and reviews, but actually they're in a separate schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Any other questions or comments? Back to you, Molly.
Thank you, Chair. So item 6 is the Counter Fraud and Investigations Mid-Year Report for 2024/25, and this is a report of the Chamberlain for information.
Thank you. Do members have any questions or comment on the report, which is for information? Yes, Kel.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to say, firstly, I think it's a very good report, so thank you very much for giving it to us. I noted that you have held a number of prevent fraud workshops. I was wondering what the key themes were that have come out of those workshops. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chairman. The key things really have been quite similar insofar as relating to employee-related matters. A lot of the key formats actually they've managed quite well in current policy and procedure. Some of the things we've really identified from, particularly with the investment property group and commercial, is that they're sort of about how the teams work together to tackle those fraud risks. So what we're looking to do ideally is we're hoping to have sort of facilitate a sort of a joint session between them. The plan really is now the workshop's being delivered is for all those teams to come back with their completed fraud risk registers, and we can really work from there to provide sort of a high level holistic view of where we are.
Thank you. Dan.
Thanks. Chris, thanks for the report. Can I just check it's mid-year 25/26, not?
Apologies, I just noticed that. I do apologise.
Thank you. The report's great. There's one thing that I think we've talked about in this room before that I'd encourage, which is that return on investment. So how much as a corporation do we invest in these activities? What's the return? We've got financial recovery figures, but there's not a lot of information about detection or the cultural return or the benefits of kind of being seen in the back. So I think you could really strengthen your reporting by ROI and being clearer on that. And I think there's probably some good examples across the sector that you can draw from, because it just amplify a decent report already.
Thank you, Dan. David, you're next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points. I was very interested in reading the investigations and the process that's been gone through. Doesn't mention anything about criminal proceedings. I just wondered. I mean, there's some pretty large figures there, which indicate some sort of quite large scale fraud going on, and I just wondered whether the police getting involved was part of the process, or what part of the process that undertook. And then I've just got a couple of other questions from my understanding, really, of the interaction with the credit agency stuff, how that kind of works, and what sort of things that in one bit about when he talked about the social housing tenancy fraud, or the credit reference agency data matching, there was 1,867 cases, of which there was different categories, and then at the bottom there was nil with 532, and I just really wondered what that issue was. Plus also it talks about the recovery of one large amount, and then it talks about the team had recovered 196,000 from small business rate fraud investigation. I understand that was from one case. And then it talks about savings of 315,000. Now, I just wondered whether there was any recovery, whether that 315,000 was just going forward, or whether there was any possibility of recovery for any previous activity on that. Sorry, a lot of questions, but.
Thank you, David. Chris, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to adjust those in order. The matter of the police being involved in investigations, we will involve the police as is necessary. We do tend to, or most of our investigations tend to be managed in-house, and we prosecute under the Local Government Act or local government powers under the Fraud Act generally. We do currently have one case which is awaiting trial in the Old Bailey. I believe that's next April or May. I'd need to check my diary on that, so please don't hold me to that. Two other cases are currently in progress for being prepared for prosecution action. They are business rates related again, and we will report those to this committee. What we tend to find, or what we tend to be finding more recently, is that with the courts being so busy, the time between getting a case from being listed to being heard at trial can take several years. If I take the example of the case going to trial next year, that was first heard in the Magistrates Court in 2024. So that's going to be sort of a period of 3 years of the running, and the value of those cases can fall over that period of time. We've also sort of taken a view that where we can identify funds as part of that case, but we'll take that case forward so we can use proceeds of crime or unlawful profit orders to recover the money for the organisation. Otherwise, with the tenancy fraud stuff, we tend to try and just recover the tenancy and move on. So that's the first bit. The credit reference agencies, in relation to what data we identify, the CIA data, the credit reference data, looks at mortgage data, deceased data, other persons linked to the addresses, and our tenants listed out elsewhere on different properties. As part of that, it gives us sort of a risk score and intelligence to identify what cases we need to take forward. The 532 listed under nil, they relate to where there's no issue whatsoever found by Experian. Just finally on the notional savings and recovered year to date. The notional savings very much just they relate to what the fraud values would be. In those, the tenancy fraud values are based on a right to buy fraud or right to buy fraud that we stopped. So we use the value of that right to buy discount, and also the subletting cases where we use a London figure of about, I think it's about £59,000.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, Timothy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm interested in the outcomes and lessons learnt. You've given some notional savings, David Sales pointed out, but are there any lessons learnt? Do the teams, let's say the housing team, do you go back to them and say, you need to look for this, this and this, or these are the issues, and does that spread throughout the organisation? Because it's all very well you undertaking this work, but if it just continues at the same pace without anybody looking at it, it won't achieve a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, certainly, so I can address that with housing first. With the housing team, we've done an awful lot of work with the housing allocations team in order to get those 4 prevention measures in place from the outset. They seem to be working well. There's sort of a continuous ongoing dialogue with housing management. We meet with them on a monthly basis to discuss the cases that we have underway and to discuss the outcome of any cases and what further action could be taken. Just an example of that, the housing team are doing a full tenancy audit, and we're going to use the intelligence we have from both the internal investigations and from the Experian matching to identify those high risk areas, so that we can ensure that they're using intelligence to identify the cases or the properties where there may be a higher risk of fraud. in addition to this, also to make sure that the housing management are aware of where the fraud risks are, so that they can work with their housing managers effectively to combat so for example Airbnb fraud or short-term letting fraud. We have agreed to do a series of training sessions with the housing team in January, so that should help us really to try and sort of tackle the risks there, any ongoing risks. More generally, if we have a corporate investigation, we will report to the director and the head of service on that. Any series of recommendations will be included in that report to make sure the lessons are learned and acted upon.
Is that reported to members?
They will be when we have that type of report. We're very happy to provide that summary of that report to members. Yes.
Thank you, Timothy. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chairman. So moving on to item 7, which is the risk management update, and this is a report of the Chief Strategy Officer for Information.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Do members have any questions or comments on this report? Gail, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Deanna and Tabitha and the team for working on this report, and especially for updating and revising the risks. I just did have one comment as an independent member. When I looked at the names of the new risks, it wasn't as clear to me as it potentially could be as to what they represented. So was wondering if there could be a little bit of additional thought for those looking in at those risks who are not part of the corporation, to see if the wording might be altered slightly to improve the clarity. Thank you.
Dion, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Chair, for the question. Happy to take this away and have a look at it, both with the risk owners, but also with the Chief Officer Risk Management Group. One thing to note is, in terms of the headlines and descriptions, we purposely did move away from some of the more detailed descriptions, because we were finding, and feedback from this committee previously is that we were finding we were going quite into the detail and looking at departmental level rather than corporate. That's not to say a point well made around, is it clear when you're first looking at the risks? Just to reassure members, the officers do spend their time in the detail, so please don't take any ambiguity with the headline as being that they haven't gripped the risks, because they are gripping them, and I know that wasn't the assertion from the Deputy Chair. I am happy, Chair, if there are any other comments or discussion, there's one other point that I would like to add related to this, but prefer to take it in non-public if that's okay.
That will be fine. Thank you, Dion. Dan, you are next.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about CR35, which is the medium-term finance risk. There's a known unknown, right, around what the government's proposing about business rates redistribution. And I just wanted to understand if and how that factors into the thinking on the scoring of CR35, given that that's something under consideration. And then the second point is, the target score is half the current score and it's on a constant trajectory. So how realistic is the target date at the end of this financial year? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the first question, so the business rates, and this links to the reset. This largely depends as well on the outcome for the fair funding formula and transitional relief. So at this stage, we understand from MHCLG that transitional relief will be provided, which makes the risk less onerous on us. That said, we won't know for certain until we get the local government settlement, which will be in December and late December. So that will be one to watch, but I anticipate it becoming far better. In terms of how realistic is it to halve it, then the real position will be, and I think is in 2029-30, which is when the reset starts again. And in terms of our fair funding formula, that's when the real position comes through. That I envisage will be a drop in funding, that will be significant, but we do have time to plan. And from that point of view, I think that halving it would be realistic.
Yes, Dan, carry on.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't trying to pull at the target score, but the target date, and whether it's too near term, because it's the 31st of March 2026, so not the score, the date.
So by that date, we will know what the transitional relief is over the period of the settlement. So that will give us for the next couple of years. Yes, when it gets to 29/30, all bets are off at the moment as to what that actually is.
Thank you, Caroline. Simon, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. So I just had a query about the Chief Risk Officer Network hosted by the late Lord Mayor. And I note the reference to the Chief Strategy Officer attending that. I just wanted to ask if there's any ongoing engagement between this wider group and the Chief Risk Officer Network. Thank you.
Dion, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Absolutely. So up until last week, there was the launch of the Chief Risk Officer, it's hard to say with braces in, network, which is in collaboration with Bayes Business School. It continues the research that they undertook under Unleashing Growth, the previous Lord Mayor's agenda. We are feeding into that in two main ways. So firstly is the City of London Corporation as the host, so purposely making sure that we continue the agenda of looking at the approach to risk and using it as a force for good, which actually the corporation is a trailblazer under your guidance and stewardship. But secondly, also looking at risk practitioners. As you may notice, I'm not the Chief Risk Officer, but I am the Chief Strategy Officer, and that is actually a signalling of the way forward, where we have a lot of risk integrated into informing business decisions and looking at innovation and creativity. So we will continue with that. I was going to mention it under AOB, but it's as a shout out that the Chief Risk Officer Summit, the World Summit, is again going to be hosted by the City of London next May, and we will continue to input through that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. Steve, you're next, followed by Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to Risk Zero, CR02, which is now known as Cities Corporation's role in promoting UK FPS. I know it used to be called loss of business support. I know this was previously considered ambiguous, what this was about. And there's obviously been an attempt to clarify it, but it sounds like quite a different risk. So I'd just be keen to understand more, Chair, about how that risk has been revised to become City Corporation's role in promoting UK FPS, and as part of that, why the overall level of risk has reduced significantly, because it sounds like quite a different risk.
Thank you, Steve. Dion, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm going to look down the line as well, so that some of my colleagues who may have a bit more detail, if that's possible. So this was one of the risks that I trialled it a couple of times at previous audit and risk management committees, because we knew for a long time that the original risk at the time had passed. So it actually wasn't articulating what the biggest risks were related to the organisation. So therefore, what members are seeing now is the culmination of a number of weeks and months worth of work, particularly with our Chief Officer in Innovation and Growth, which is the owner of this risk, to articulate what is it that we're actually concerned about versus what's business as usual and ticking over at a departmental level. You'll note, as the member has said, around the focus changing substantially, and also that the rating has changed to an amber risk. I'm just looking across, sorry, bear with me. So, and this came at a Chief Officer Risk Management Group meeting quite recently. So the main focus and the main reason that it's changed is that we're looking at loss of support for SMEs in the square mile. Again, I think this has come up at court as well as at this meeting. And moving more towards looking at us being ineffective or not as ambitious as we need to be in order to support those small, medium enterprises. I think the so sorry, that was the clarification. So I think apologies, I can't remember which member it was that mentioned previously that actually our concerns were around how the corporation could support SMEs the way that it was worded previously was about our inability to support businesses more widely, and that wasn't the case. So that's why the wording has changed, the focus has changed, and the mitigations have changed accordingly. Having said that, and I'm going to check with colleagues, at a departmental level, we haven't lost sight of that overall approach for the corporation supporting businesses, full stop. So don't want members to go away thinking that we've just stopped work in one area at the expense of what we're looking at corporate risk. There are things looked at slightly more detail across the departments, but I just want to check with my team to see if there's anything else they want to add.
No, I think that's accurate. That we had a discussion at the Chief Officer Risk Management Group about the fact that this is holistic around FPS, going beyond the square mile, but obviously there are a number of different risks which underpin and dovetail into this, and that's another piece of work that we are doing at that corporate risk level, which is to try and map and make sure that people are connecting and understanding where the ripple effect and those either dependencies or interconnections are between risks that are held in different parts of the corporation, because obviously we're wanting to look at that strategic oversight, and it needs to be thought about as us enabling our strategic objectives at that level, but as it goes down into different departments, they will look more specifically at their individual aims linked into their business plans.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. I understand that, and it does seem to be a completely valid corporate risk. It just seems to be quite a different risk, in my opinion, Chair, because I think we've just changed the perspective here. It used to be, or certainly the title used to suggest it was about businesses not supporting a corporation. I think it now seems to be about the corporation not supporting businesses. I know that it's all interlinked, probably two sides of the same coin, but it's quite a shift in emphasis. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Steve. Liz, please.
First, I'd like to say thanks to Dion for this, and I absolutely love that the main report starts off with process and culture, because I think it speaks right to the strategy point that has come up, that it's how we do our business, and I think that's a great point to make. I have a question about new corporate risk 42, the HRA. I don't know if that should go into non-public, because we're sort of at a delicate point. But my point is, yes, from when it was raised in October 23 and where we are, and then I know work is going on it, but having the risk between today and the beginning, March 26 seems, back to that point, seems very optimistic.
Caroline, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I think in public session we can say that there are three main risks around the HRA. The first one is the immediate risk. It is a fragile position. That's very clear from the accounts which members have seen, and addressing that in year is something that we have a very we have a very robust action plan to do, and that is a collaborative situation with the Executive Director of Children and Community Services and the cities are there. The second one is more about the medium term. So what do we need to do to address the change in legislation, and this is the type of risk that is affecting every HRA in the country, and local authorities are struggling with that. That's a medium-term risk, and I can go through in private session what we're looking at in that. And then there's a wider position which members have referred to in Policy and Resources and in Finance Committee about what does this mean long term, and so I think in those three categories we need to be looking at the overall thing. Right now, though, I think we're focused on the immediate and the medium term, so in terms of budget setting next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Members, any other? Oh, Gian, please.
Thank you, Chair. If there are no more questions, and I'm just going to pause, I was going to update the committee. As you know, we do dynamic risk reporting, and from the time of the papers being published, there will be changes. If it's okay with you, Chair, I was just going to go through a couple of the changes so the committee has the latest.
Yeah, please do so.
Thank you very much. So in addition to those points that have already been made, and thank you, members, actually you've picked up on all the risks where there had been changes, so I won't repeat what's already been said. I did want to introduce our Chief People Officer, Cliff Morton, who is down the end of the room. As I mentioned to this committee at the last meeting, recruitment and retention was CR 39. That was quite a legacy risk, and there'd been a lot of work behind the scenes to again articulate what is it when it comes to people that is the biggest things that should keep us awake at night. The Chief People Officer is doing a lot of work in this space, both at a departmental level, but also across corporation level. And we invited him to attend this committee so that he could talk from a position of risk, as opposed to overstepping with the role and remit of Corporate Services Committee about what he is doing and the work that we're doing with Chief Officer Risk Management Group. You will start to see the product of that work coming through our reports and see more detail at the next meeting of Audit and Risk Management Committee. But if there are any questions or updates that the Chief People Officer can do, then he is here to do that. The only couple of other things I was going to mention was related around CR 29, which is the information management risk. We'll note this has moved to department level. Again, I mentioned this at the last committee, but this is also a nod to us through Chief Officer Risk Management Group looking at what is it around information. We're clear that it's related to data, and therefore work ongoing to look at whether we have the equivalent of a data risk. It will be more defined than that, but again, that's going to be coming through Chief Officer Risk Management Group in Q4. So again, you will see it in future committees. The last one, again, similarly, the information security risk. As members will know, this is our highest risk at a corporate level. We touch on it at most meetings. Suffice to say, there was a meeting last week, which I thought was really helpful. Chamberlain was nodding, so she agrees with me. But as the Chamberlain is the owner of the information security risk, we really wanted to test the level of this risk against our risk appetite. Obviously, we're covering risk appetite in non-public, so I won't go into further detail. But I think it was helpful to be able to test our highest rated risk with the mitigations and looking at whether or not our tolerance and appetite is at the right level. Again, I'm happy to pick up more detail in non-public. But Chair, just wanted to check if you wanted any more information on the people-related risk with the Chief People Officer being present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dion. Are there any questions or comments from members? Yes, Steve.
Well, Chairman, I would just ask that we do hear a few words from Cliff if he's willing to give us an update, because I think as a member of the Corporate Services Committee, I hear a lot about the work that Cliff and his team are up to. I think it is very relevant to this committee. There are all sorts of challenges that I know he's dealing with, which do pose risks, but it sounds like it's heading in the right direction. I think it would be worth us hearing more from Cliff, if that's okay.
Thank you, Steve. I think that's a very good idea. Cliff, please.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me, first of all, and thank you very much for the introduction, Dion. Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. So I've been in the organisation approximately 6 months as an interim to start transforming the HR function into world class, and I think particularly around this risk, when reviewing it, it hadn't been looked at for a fair old time. And if you look at the trajectory of attrition, voluntary attrition across the organisation, it's gone from 9.6 to 9 and then held steady at 9 within the organisation. Now, I think firstly that tells a story across a corporation wide, but one of the things we're doing within HR is using data and insight to get much more into the detail of things. And if you actually look across the organisation, the attrition rate is varying anywhere between about 4.6 to 16.8 across the latest dashboard. And of course, we work in an organisation where we're reporting against City of London Police, against environment and people that are working outside versus corporate roles, and there's a whole wide range of roles. My intent to move this to be managed locally is purely because we now have the information and the data to be able to actually really get in and work with the chief officers much more locally in their spaces to actually identify the cause of the attrition rates across the different areas, because it will vary for somebody working in a cemetery versus somebody working in the Guildhall within finance or HR. So the whole principle of actually transforming and modernising HR into a world-class environment is to be able to work much more effectively locally, to be able to give the right answers and put the right solutions in place that are actually appropriate to that department. Having an overarching figure, I think, tells a story, but kind of just doesn't get into the detail of what it actually means. And if you work on a an industry average of about 10 to 12% being acceptable for your attrition rate, running at about 9.6, and then it actually going down to 9 does kind of put it lower than that envelope as an organisational one. But as you can tell from the 16.8 figure that I've already given, it doesn't tell the full story, and I think we can do that much more effectively at a local level. I think where I want to move the risk to, subject to conversation with Corporate Service Committee, because this needs to have a conversation there, is around change readiness for the organisation. I think the members in this room will be aware that we have subject to member agreement, Ambition 25 coming down the line. That will fundamentally impact how we are managing people's career paths within the organisation and succession planning. That alone will result in a big conversation for managers around career development and the type of culture we're creating in the organisation. How we're doing performance management will need to adjust and become much more rigorous. We have SAP as a new HR and finance system coming through, which will enable people to be able to do HR on their phones. We have an evolving chatbot, success management training across the piece. So I would like to move the risk into a much more organisational change readiness position around the culture of the organisation, how we're managing change and enabling our managers and people to be ready for a new world with SAP, with Ambition 25, with much more focus on career development and our culture moving forward, rather than just kind of the anomalous kind of 9% figure we have for attrition. So that's kind of my gambit, I guess.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for our Chief People Officer? Yes, Timothy.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a slightly different question? What are the sickness rates running at?
Sorry, give me 1 second. I have the dashboard open in front of me. So give me a second to press a few buttons on Power BI and I'll be able to give you a bigger number. So once again, this will be a number as to why we need to be looking at it kind of locally, because from previous experience, I'll be able to say that probably environment in winter is likely to go up due to the number of outside workers compared to other areas, and once again needs to be managed locally. The overarching average number of days lost across the organisation is 6.4 by FTE across the course of the year at the moment, based on the dashboard. I will say this dashboard's about a month old. It's due to be refreshed this week. This committee came about 3 days before the dashboard got updated. But once again, I think that's another one that we need visibility of, but actually needs much more local management, because I think the impacts on sickness across the organisation will vary wildly depending on where you work.
Thank you very much. On clock.
Thank you, Chairman. So we move on to item 8, which is the internal audit update, and this is a report of the Group Chief Internal Auditor for information.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions or comments on this report? Yes, Dan, please.
Matt, thanks for the report. Thanks for the. It's really easy to engage with and get to the bottom. So thank you for the MI. I just wanted to follow up on the consultancy use internal audit. Partly because that kind of the range in 24-25 of 20 million to 60 million of spend is quite a range, but kind of that links to your recommendations. It says that management actions agreed for completion by the end of October and a follow-up in November. So can you let us know where you're up to on actions completed and the follow-up audit for this month, please?
Yes, so of the 3 recommendations that were made, one has been implemented, and there's progress against the others. So in terms of actually creating a definition, that's been progress. We haven't reviewed it yet, but it's there. The second recommendation where there's significant progress is in relation to the chart of accounts. So it's updating the codes that we use when we're raising purchase orders and accounting for the expenditure, and that's really what's going to be able to give us the clarity. Now that actually delivering impact is all linked to SAP and the move to the new ERP, so it'll be some time before we get the full value from that, but that is where the solution lies. So things are progressing well, and then it's actually from that point of having that better management information, understanding where these things are, it'll be much easier to target problem management interventions.
Thank you, Matt. Any other questions or comment? Naresh followed by Gail.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. I'm just trying to understand, is there a mapping system which looks at, we're paying X amount for consultancy versus what are our internal resources enable in a sense of, do we have like a skills audit to match where we've got those consultancy gaps versus what we have within the organization? And if for example, it's a capacity issue, is there a system of, for example, internal training so that particularly if we have those consultancy, regular consultancies in a particular area, how we could fill that gap and therefore potentially reduce our consultancy fees? Like, I'm just thinking, like, for example, the NHS, it spends God knows how many billions on hiring accountancy firms to put our PowerPoint presentation over and over and over again, when actually there's more expertise within the NHS than outside the NHS on this. So I'm just trying to think, is there a solution which can be mapped out internally to reflect that? Thank you.
Thank you, Naresh. Caroline, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the question, because I think that this gets to the heart of value for money of spend on consultants and also on workforce planning and succession planning. I would say in order to be able to answer that question, we really need to have the building blocks of exactly what people are doing within the organisation, and that we are getting through our new system through SAP. So we now, with Organisation Manager, for the first time, will have a view of where everybody sits in the organisation. Succession planning is something that Cliff will be able to speak to, but that is a project which will be shortly in play. In terms of what would we expect to see at this moment? I think members, we need to be very clear. We have a massive capacity issue with our permanent workforce, given the amount of projects which we currently have underway. So I'll refer you to some of the analysis that we put in the original paper, which was it's a judgment call, because you need to buy in skills for a period of time. It doesn't make sense for that to be a permanent member of staff, but where that is the case, you need to have handover of those skills. So I would say this is very much on our radar. It's a work in progress. We need the building blocks to be able to push this and drive this through. But I'll hand over to Cliff to talk about the workforce planning and.
Cliff, please.
Thank you, Chair. So a strategic workforce planning role is part of the transformation of HR, so that's being brought in as part of the current recruitment drive. Caroline is absolutely spot on. I think the criticality of this is the data and the forward look. We do incredibly good and effective financial plans for the years. My business partners are getting involved in that process now to actually identify the type of activity that's being done, what sort of skills you need, and I think really pertinent to this question, what sort of resource should be being brought in. So if you have a piece of work that's going to last longer than 2 years, then I suggest it may well be a permanent resource. If it's going to be about a year, then you might want to use a fixed term contractor. If it's a specialist skill set, then use a consultant. So a much more intelligent way of doing it from using the data we're getting. It's also worth mentioning at this time, Ambition 25 and the career frameworks and the job families within that, within HR, we are looking at that map across the organisation as we capture the job families and the career frameworks. So somebody sat in one department that may be interested in a role in a different part of the organisation, we can actually start mapping those skills across and ensure we've got the training in place. I don't have the picture of what that looks like just yet from where we're at with Ambition 25, but it is part of the transformation of HR to make much more informed, intelligent decisions about it. And I think with that forward look would enable us to say, well, actually, we need, let's use the live example, somebody really good at strategic workforce planning to come in for 4 weeks to really ramp up how we do it. That would be on my plan. We could intelligently purchase that resource in the right way to be able to do it effective. A lot of this is the evolution of HR we're in at the moment.
Cliff, thank you very much. I have Gail.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, echoing Dan's comments, thanks very much for the report, and I particularly like the new one-page summaries, which are really great. I know we've had this conversation before about overdue actions and capacity within the team, but I just did want to flag, I think it's worrisome when we have a number of road actions that are more than a year out, and I was thinking particularly about the ones relating to fire safety, given the recent audit on health and safety at the Barbican Centre. So I was just wondering what plans your team had to follow up with those overdue actions, And I'm curious as well as to whether or not those might be referred back to the individual committees, such as the new actions. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, so in relation to the housing fire safety audits, we have completed follow-up work, and we've been back actually more than once to look at progress in implementing those recommendations. So yeah, so really the next action is to escalate those. So I will apply the insight report format for that. So so we've got exactly the same sort of template for reporting follow-up findings, and that will be the vehicle to use to escalate those matters to the relevant service committee. Yeah, that's going to happen very soon.
Thank you, Matt. I have got next Liz. Oh, that's done. Okay, then Ruby. We are on report 7, risk strategy.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to pick up on what Cliff was saying, and also what the Chamberlain was saying about there's a lot of important work that's now being done, and systems are being implemented. Would it be possible to actually have a report on the progress of that in, say, 6 months' time or something, to sort of see where we're at, and to sort of see what's been identified as additional risks, or what's being mitigated, and what's working and what isn't?
Cliff, please.
No, I think absolutely. I think that makes complete sense of progress as well, because I'm putting mitigating actions in against the change readiness. And I think it's important to be able to update about what we're seeing. And I think there's things like staff absence, if that's changing, number of grievances, there's a whole host of information we'll be able to pull to try and show you the trajectory and how it's working. So absolutely.
Thank you very much. Yes, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Further question on the use of consultants audit, and specifically the IR35 element. The conclusion is that there's an absence of a structured and well-governed framework of control over the use of consultants. Can I clarify, does that apply to IR35 as well, or are there separate frameworks and governance in respect to IR35? And also, is that part of the follow-up audit planned for November onwards? Thank you.
So there is a link between like the use of consultants and the IR35 compliance. But we've also actually undertaken before this particular piece of work a separate piece that was more targeted around IR35. The arrangements in place for actually ensuring that when colleagues engage consultants, and they undertake all of the necessary due diligence and so on, there isn't really anything within the organisation to control and govern that. So it is a case of engaging managers, in most instances identifying the right things to do themselves. So there's something that that needs to be in place within the organisation to do that. One of the real challenges is the fact that these things, consultants can be engaged in a number of different ways. So and this comes back to that same point about having that management information. So sometimes they will be sort of more of a people-based appointment. So it'll be appointing an interim. That's quite clear to identify and then assess. In other cases, it might be a sole trader or someone operating for a limited company that's engaged via a procurement route. And unless these things are accurately described, it's really hard to identify that that's the nature of that work. So sometimes expenditure might be coded, or purchase orders might be raised against an activity rather than the nature of the activity. So that makes it hard to sort of bring these things out. And it's just making sure that people know who to go to obtain the relevant expertise or advice and knowledge to set things up in the right way. So there is quite a broad issue there.
Caroline, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at this from the financial risk point of view. In terms, as Matt's explained, in terms of people employing people on a short-term contract, there are obviously arrangements through the agency that we use to ensure that is dealt with. Direct employment, that is for the line manager to go through. When we look at the controls around it, it is a governance guiding checklist to go through. As Matt's pointed out, I think the key piece is the risk around, has somebody employed a sole trader? and has that gone through, or is that an area? Now, at the moment, our management information, as Matt's referred to, wouldn't enable us to identify where that is the case very easily, certainly not at a top-down review. As we get into the SAP coding and into the new system, this will become far easier to identify. And that what I would say, though, is as a result of the audit, we have not found a material risk on this. But I think the key thing, of course, is that we need to make sure that the procedures are appropriate and liaising with HR colleagues to define what those should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Members, thank you for those contributions. If there are no further points, I would like to raise a concern, which is mentioned by Gail already, regarding the overdue red recommendations in Appendix 4. In particular, how some of the implementation target dates are still due from 2024. I'd like to see the report amended to include revised dates for all overdue red recommendations and a summary of the action taken to address them as of today. I would also like the chairs of those committees to be contacted. If the recommendations are still overdue in 3 months from today, I would like to invite the chairs to our committee. Caroline, I also note several items are overdue from your department. Would you like to provide members with an update, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. So members, you'll be aware on the procurement regulations that those have been defined and are going through committee to address those. In terms of the conflict of interest, those are the June dates. The team are still working on those, so we will be able to provide an update for that. The focus at the moment has been on the contract management side, but we will be updating those. I don't know if Matt's received an update. I did ask for one this morning.
Since this report was published, we've actually we've undertaken follow-up work in relation to those 6 conflict of interest recommendations, and we've closed all 6, but there's still work to be done. So we're actually discussing 3 revised recommendations. So that reflects the action that's been taken so far and where things have moved on. So we actually only issued the audit report that they relate to earlier this year. The timescales for taking action were quite aggressive, and actually it's not there were some actions that were directly outside of the control of the commercial team. So basically we've re-reviewed and recast some new recommendations to pick up the remaining issues with revised timescales. So the revised timescales for that remaining activities is still to be finalised, but good progress has been made.
Thank you, Matt. Let's monitor it over the next 3 months, please. Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Moving on to item 9, Cities Estate Financial Statements, which was circulated as a late item, and this is for decision.
Daniel.
I was just going to say, Chair, the auditors are waiting outside. If I could just go and get them and bring them in.
Thank you. Cliff, thank you. Daniel, thank you so much. Please, could you provide a summary of the report and what you're asking members to approve?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So taking items 9 and 10 sort of together, in essence, they're the same thing. So the city estate financial statements, and then the sundry trust funds and other annual reports for the financial year 24-25. So this is similar to the city fund item that we had at the last meeting, in that the accounts are now, I don't want to say finalise the audit process, but very much in the last stages. So we're able to have colleagues from Crow come here today and provide their audit findings report and give you a summary of what they found within the accounts. I think the overarching messages are that we have again been able to kind of improve the process on previous years. We are ahead of where we were in terms of timings from the last previous years. So again, we're kind of on track to sign off the accounts and submit them within the overall timeframes, which is very positive. These reports have already been to Finance Committee in a very similar format. There's slightly different, but essentially due to the timing of getting the various sign-offs, these reports went to Finance Committee at the beginning of November. Were approved to get the necessary delegations from Finance Committee to sign, subject to the review and approval from Audit and Risk Committee. So following this meeting, should members be content to approve the recommendations, then we will move forward and get the necessary signings and take them forward. The key messages from Finance Committee that the Chair particularly wants to highlight, I suppose, on the city's estate accounts in particular, were just to kind of note the overall reduction on the net asset position, reflecting the kind of scale of investment across our major programmes and the need to dispose of assets to fund those. So that was one thing that he particularly wanted to pick up. I think outside of that, the reports hopefully demonstrate, as I said, the progress we've made. We have noted down all of the adjustments that we're anticipating to make in the reports. Again, none of them are kind of significantly material adjustments, but equally we wanted to just make sure that they were visible to members there. So that's kind of an overarching view of the report and where we are. Probably easier if I hand over to colleagues from Crow who may want to go through their report, unless you had any questions first before handing over.
Thank you, Daniel. I think we would like to hear from Crow. Tina, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yes, the audit is nearly complete. You will see in my report, which has been released to you as a draft report at this point, there are a few things that are outstanding, none of which we are overly concerned about. It's just a case of getting over the line with these last few things. So I am anticipating that we will meet our target to complete this by the end of this month. There are noted in the back of this report adjustments of 16.1 million, which there are at the moment no plans to adjust. These are not material, but we're, in accordance with previous years, we do need to note these for your attention. So walking through our audit, there haven't been any very significant findings. I think the audit process has gone very well. The two teams have worked well together. The particular stumbling block we had a couple of years ago around consolidation has gone very smoothly, and I am encouraged about that. There are some findings in the back of the report that I would like to just draw your attention to, and these are more thinking about going forward and how you strengthen your internal controls to make sure that all areas of this business are covered. I should have said at the beginning, apologies, that with me is Vincent, who is the audit partner for the Natural Environments and Sundry Trusts. I think you will see in my report throughout it is a theme of saying we tend to think of everything at a big level here, at corporation level. So some of the thresholds, so for approving a journal is 100,000, for capitalisation is 50,000. These are very high thresholds, we think, in the context of natural environments and sundry trusts. So would encourage you to be thinking about bringing these thresholds down more commensurate with the audit materialities in those areas. But on specific points, so if I just give you a page number check, one only one small point raised this year on page 29, which I hope is encouraging. That shows that there has been improvement from previous years where we've had a number of findings. This just relates to the natural environments and making sure we're underpinning that grant funding. I would draw to your attention the progress on points raised in previous periods. There has been progress, but there are still a few that we would encourage you to get over the line. So particularly on page 36, journal reviews is an important area, and particularly management accounts on page 38.
That's page 431. For page 36. And
Thank
sorry,
you.
your next page was?
Page 38.
Page 38 and 433.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm working off a different draft. We will follow up with management for timelines for these to be implemented. From page 41 onwards is our IT controls, findings and recommendations, and I would particularly draw your attention to those flagged red as being the ones clearly most urgently for remediation. So with that, Chair, perhaps I should pause and let committee take questions.
Tina, thank you very much. Members, questions, comments? Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate that the comment that was made earlier about the net assets of Cities Estate. I think it cannot be emphasised enough that Cities Estate is in decline. We are reducing the net asset value year on year. At the current trend rate, it'll be gone in my lifetime. I think we need to be aware of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions or comments?
If I could
Caroline,
come in
please.
on that one, Chairman. So yes, I think members, we are drawing down on the asset base, and I think the important thing to note here is that we're drawing down on the investments to effectively put into operational property. Now, that's fine while you're growing it, but this is, as the member quite rightly points out, this is an endowment fund. So I know Finance Committee are very cited on this as a point. Of course, the investment strategy is also around ensuring that the balance sheet growth of those assets is also retained. So that's something that we'd model. So I don't recognise it will disappear in your lifetime, but because there is an investment strategy which is there to ensure that that doesn't happen to the endowment fund. However, I do think that clearly the current call on the asset base at this rate is unsustainable. I would say we are in a massive catch-up period for underinvestment in our operational property. We have seen massive growth over the last decade in our balance sheet and in our investment properties in order to pay for some of that, but clearly it does need working through, and that is part of the Finance Committee's longer term look of looking at the 10 to 20 year horizon. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Tina, could you please elaborate on the concern you raised about management accounts? What do we need to do?
We do need to get into a process of routinely producing management accounts. The reason I flagged this originally, which I think was 2003, is just to make sure you have those top level controls and oversight of the numbers throughout the year in a formalised fashion. And if you look at management accounts as part of internal control, this shouldn't be interpreted there isn't internal control. That's not what I'm saying, but it is a function of a system of internal control and an important piece. If you took that item plus the fact that journals at £100,000 are not separately reviewed, you're relying on picking up things in the numbers to actually act as your compensating control. So I think it's quite an important thing.
Thank you very much. Caroline, please.
I think it's a very well made point from the audit team. I think we're looking, and I've certainly asked Financial Services Director to look very carefully at the monthly information that goes to service committees and to boards in order for them to be able to manage this, and particularly looking at by fund and by charity. So absolutely take that on board. Thank you.
So Caroline, thank you very much. So when are we going to start producing these management accounts?
So we do already produce quarterly reports every year, which go to a committee. We are actually doing our first kind of interim report for month 7 at the moment. So we're now introducing kind of additional ones in addition to those quarterly reports to make sure there's further granularity. I suppose just on the others, again, power stations do receive the Power Station Board's quarterly management account. So I think it's more, we are producing them quarterly at the moment, and I think it's more the look to try and expand that even further, as I mentioned, of which month 7 is the first time we're doing that. And then as we build in the timetable for the new SAP ERP system, we'll obviously be looking to do that permanently on a monthly basis rather than just what we're doing at the moment.
Thank you. Tina, are you asking them to produce monthly or quarterly?
I've been very clear that we need monthly accounts. There have to be monthly accounts going to all the committees, all the boards, and on top of that, I would expect those reports to have within there any internal control weaknesses, any audit recommendations that need to be included in it. So where the team have, I would say probably a year ago, we're just coming out of being under capacity and special arrangements made for quarterly reporting. I've been very clear that that is not the business as usual. Business as usual is monthly reporting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. Tina, would that be okay then? Thank you, Tina. And Caroline, maybe I don't understand. When would you be able to produce those monthly reports? Like, when do we start that?
So monthly reports have happened at the officer level. So to executive leadership board, those are produced monthly. I think what is being referred to is whether committees are getting them on a monthly basis and to the level of detail. Now, from I'm going to ask Sonia in terms of where she sits with the charities and what the plans are under the charities review. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chamberlain. So the charities review is taking a different, they are reviewing the way they report this information. It does, unfortunately, the committees don't fall on a monthly basis, so it will go to when the committees are taking place. Some of that are happening quarterly, but they will be producing full set of accounts to those committees.
Okay, thank you very much. Tina, does that work?
Yes, look forward to seeing it. Be good.
Thank you so much. Ruby, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, and apologies if I misunderstood, Tina, but you said that you initially identified this issue back in 2023. What I'm a little confused about why it's taken 2 odd years to actually get to this stage where we're actually addressing what was highlighted 2 years ago.
Thank you for the question. So you may recall that 2 years ago I had 30 vacancies, and it's taken quite a bit of time to get those vacancies up to speed. But we also had a backlog of accounts on the city fund accounts, which the team, obviously Ian is now 2 years in, has been able to catch up on those accounts as well. And also we are also in the process of going through a transformational journey, which is looking at how we make our changes to our processes, but also how we are going to use that within the new implementation of our ERP program as well. So a lot's happened in the round, and you will note that actually a lot of the management recommendations have been closed since the first recommendations were put open to yourselves, and that is also the case on City Fund as well. So there has been a huge amount of work, but I appreciate it. There's a lot still to do.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Yes, Timothy, please.
If you're going to produce monthly accounts, what implications does that have for resources and headcount?
As I mentioned, there's a lot of transformation that is happening at this point in time. I would need to go back to my team in relation to, in order to produce the balance sheet side of things as well across all the accounts, I would have to look at that and see how we do that. But hopefully it should be all automated and we should be able to be in a position to produce them.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Gail, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick back up on the IT controls findings, which were mentioned by Tina earlier, because we don't have the management report in there. Response, sorry. And given the fact that this relates to information security, which is the top risk of the corporation, I was wondering when we might be able to see the response on that and when those actions might be completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So yes, we'll work through with the IT team and with the finance team on getting the management responses in there, but I'd envisage that that is going to take at least a week. It's hot off the press, so yeah, we will be liaising on that one. Thank you.
Members, any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your contributions. If there are no further questions or comments, may I take them as approved? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just confirm that that covered item 10 as well?
Yep.
Thank you. So moving on to item 11, questions on matters relating to the work of the committee. I've not received any questions in advance, but do any members have any questions at present? Seeing none. We therefore move to item 12, any other business that the chairman considers urgent. I'm not aware of any of the business, but do any members wish to raise any of the business whilst in public session? No, thank you. We then move on to the exclusion of the public. Are members content to exclude the public? Thank you. Please allow a couple of minutes whilst we ensure the live stream has ended.